During my recovery from surgery, my father-in-law secretly sold my car and claimed I was too weak to drive. When I confronted him, he said, "You married into this family, you don't own anything." I smiled for the first time in weeks and said, "Good thing I never transferred the title to you." That evening he discovered. My name is Marcus, and I'm 42 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio. I've always been the kind of guy who keeps his head down, works with his hands, and minds his own business. 5 years ago, I married Sarah, and I loved her, still do in some ways, but I barely recognize the woman she's become. Life was pretty quiet until my back gave out. A herniated disc pressed against my spinal cord, making every step feel like lightning shooting through my legs. The doctors said surgery was my only option, followed by at least 8 weeks of recovery. No lifting, no bending, and some days I couldn't even make it to the bathroom without help. Sarah stepped up those first few days. She took time off from her job at the insurance company, helped with my meals and medications, even helped me shower. But Sarah wasn't built for sitting still. She got restless, started making excuses to leave. I need to check on mom, or work called, or I forgot about my dentist appointment. Eventually, she started disappearing for hours, sometimes overnight. That's when her father, Frank, started showing up instead. Frank Morrison was a retired state trooper, and that should have been my first red flag. When I proposed to Sarah 6 years ago, she promised he'd warm up to me eventually. He never did. Frank always looked at me like I was wearing his clothes without permission. He never said it directly, but the way he talked down to me, treated me like some charity case who didn't deserve his daughter, it ate at me. When Frank started coming by during my recovery, I thought maybe this was his way of helping. He'd drop off groceries from Kroger, ask if I'd taken my pain medication, check if I needed anything. But soon, little things started going missing. First, it was small stuff. My watch, my Ray-Ban sunglasses. Then one morning, my keys vanished from the kitchen counter. "You probably misplaced them," Frank shrugged when I asked. "You're on some pretty heavy painkillers, Marcus. Your mind's probably foggy." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. A few days later, I hobbled to the window and saw an empty driveway. My Ford Mustang GT, black, low miles, custom leather interior, was gone. It wasn't just any car. It was the only thing I'd ever truly splurged on, the one piece of my life that felt like pure freedom. Where was my car, and why was Frank acting like nothing had happened? I called Sarah immediately, my heart pounding through the pain medication haze. "The car's gone," I said when she picked up. She sounded genuinely surprised. "What do you mean gone? Like stolen?" "I don't know. It was there yesterday, now it's not. Your dad was here this morning, maybe he saw something." "I'll ask him," she said. "Don't panic, Marcus. There's probably a simple explanation." I waited all day. When Frank showed up the next morning with his usual bag of Dunkin' Donuts, acting like everything was normal, I didn't waste time with small talk. "Where's my car?" Frank sat down at my kitchen table like he owned the place. "Sold it." My mouth went dry. "You what? You don't need it. You're too weak to drive anyway. I got a good deal, helped you out." The room started spinning, and it wasn't from the medication. "You sold my car? You married into this family," Frank said, leaning back in his chair with that smug look I'd grown to hate. "You don't own anything." That's when something clicked inside me. Despite everything, the pain, the medication, the weeks of feeling helpless, I grinned. It was the first real smile I'd had in weeks. "Good thing I never transferred the title to you." Frank blinked. "What? You never owned it, Frank. I didn't sign anything over to you. It's still registered under my name." I watched the color drain from his face. "Which means you just admitted to selling stolen property." Frank stood up slowly, his jaw clenched. "You're confused. You've been on pills for weeks. You don't know what you signed." "Oh, I know exactly what I signed," I said. "Which is nothing." He didn't say another word. Just grabbed his coffee and left, slamming my front door so hard the windows rattled. That night, Frank came back with Sarah. They walked in like they had rehearsed this conversation. Frank started talking fast, his hands gesturing wildly. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I helped you out. You weren't going to be driving for months anyway." Sarah stepped forward. "Can we just talk this through, Marcus? Please?" I looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time in days. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else. Something rehearsed about her voice. You knew, I said quietly. Sarah looked down at her hands. How deep did this betrayal go, and what else were they hiding from me? You knew, I repeated, staring at Sarah. She didn't deny it. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I already reported the car stolen, I said, watching both their faces. Police have the VIN number. It's still registered in my name, Frank. You sold it under false pretenses. Frank's face turned red. You'll regret this, Marcus. No, I said, you will. After they left, I locked the door. Then I changed all the locks. The next morning, I started making phone calls. My buddy Jake works at the DMV, and he confirmed what I already knew. The title was still in my name. I filed an official report with the Columbus Police Department, and Detective Rodriguez took my statement seriously. Then I called my friend Tommy, who owns Morrison's auto body shop downtown. What he told me made my blood boil. Yeah, Frank brought your Mustang in 3 days ago, Tommy said. Wanted me to repaint it and remove all the custom decals. Said it was a trade-in, but something felt off about the whole thing. Guy was acting nervous, kept looking over his shoulder. Now I had Frank's confession, witnesses, and documentation. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Someone smashed my mailbox with a baseball bat. Sarah's cousin, who I barely knew, posted on Facebook about deadbeat husbands who can't handle real men, clearly aimed at me. My credit card got declined at the pharmacy because someone tried to max it out at a gas station 2 counties over. Sarah's name was still on our joint account. They were testing me, pushing to see how far they could go. I decided to push back harder. I installed security cameras around my house, 4 of them, covering every angle. I set my phone to automatically record any unknown calls. I started documenting everything. Every scratch on my car when I got it back, every threatening message, every weird incident. But the real shock came when my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on my door. Marcus, honey, she said, looking worried. That man. Sarah's father. He was in your backyard last night around 4 in the morning. I saw him from my bedroom window, going through your garbage. I checked my new security cameras, and there he was. Frank Morrison, retired state trooper, digging through my trash like a common criminal. What was Frank looking for in my garbage, and how far would he go to cover his tracks? The footage was crystal clear. Frank Morrison, rummaging through my garbage at 4:15 a.m., pulling out mail and documents, stuffing some into a plastic bag. I saved the video and added it to my growing file. But Frank wasn't done. The next morning, I found dog waste smeared across my front porch. I don't own a dog. The cameras caught him again, 3:45 a.m., tossing a bag of it on my welcome mat like it was some kind of joke. I sent the footage straight to Detective Rodriguez and filed another report. Harassment, vandalism, trespassing, the charges were adding up. Sarah moved in with her parents that week. I guess they figured they'd freeze me out, isolate me until I folded. Instead, I got stronger. My physical therapy was painful, but I forced myself to go every day. I walked with a cane, but I was walking. I closed our joint bank account and opened a new one with just my name. I gathered every piece of paperwork related to my Mustang, title, registration, insurance records, and handed it all to Detective Rodriguez. That's when I got an unexpected visitor. Sarah's brother, Mike, knocked on my door. I hadn't seen him since last Christmas. He was the only decent one in that family, though he usually kept his distance. Can I come in? He asked. Just for 5 minutes? I let him in. He looked nervous, kept glancing around like someone might be watching. I don't agree with what Dad did, Mike said. None of it, but I thought you should know, he's planning something bigger. What do you mean? He's got a buddy at the county courthouse. They're working on getting some kind of psychiatric evaluation pushed through. Court ordered. He wants you declared mentally unfit so Sarah can take over your mortgage, maybe even get power of attorney. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My name's on every document. Sarah can't just take my house. Mike looked at me seriously. They're saying you're unstable, delusional. That you've been violent toward Sarah, yelling at neighbors. Dad's got connections from his trooper days. He thinks he can get someone to file an affidavit. After Mike left, I got to work. I went to every neighbor on my street and asked them to write statements. All of them confirmed I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't threatened anyone, hadn't acted strange. Mrs. Patterson even wrote that I'd been remarkably quiet and respectful during a difficult recovery. I collected everything and brought it to my lawyer, Alan Brennan. Could Frank really use his old connections to have me declared mentally unfit, and what other secrets was he hiding? Alan Brennan had been my lawyer since my divorce from my first wife 10 years ago. He was a straight shooter who never sugar-coated anything. They're trying to build a case that you're mentally unstable, Alan said, looking over my documents. But you're building a wall of evidence that proves the opposite. Every day they lie, you stack another brick. I kept recording everything. Unknown phone calls, strange visitors, every little act of harassment. I pulled Frank's full background, public records, court documents, everything I could legally access. What I found was interesting. 2 sealed complaints from his time as a state trooper. They never stuck, but they weren't nothing either. One was excessive force, the other sexual harassment from a female officer who left the department shortly after filing. It wasn't proof, but it was smoke. And smoke usually meant fire. Then I got the break I didn't expect. The guy Frank was working with at the county courthouse got spooked. Apparently, someone tipped him off that Frank was feeding him doctored documents, fake emails, messages that never existed, forged statements. The clerk didn't want to go down for fraud, so he came clean. He gave a full statement to the police about Frank's attempted bribery and document forgery. We added it to the case file. But the best part was still coming. Detective Rodriguez called me on a Thursday morning. "Marcus, we found your car. It was in a storage unit just outside Columbus, rented under Frank's name. He'd never actually sold it, just hidden it, changed the paint job, and filed off the custom decals. Maybe he planned to sell it later, or maybe he thought I'd never check that far." When I told Detective Rodriguez the full story, he whistled low. "This guy's got serious problems. We're looking at theft, attempted fraud, vandalism, forgery, and now we can add filing false police reports." That night, Sarah showed up at my house. She banged on the door until I finally opened it. She looked exhausted, makeup smudged, hair messy. It didn't feel like a wife visiting her husband. It felt like someone coming to plead for mercy. "They're saying you're trying to destroy our family," she said. "I'm trying to protect myself," I replied. "Something you clearly won't do." She started crying. "You don't understand. My dad, he's just old school. He thought he was helping. I don't care what he thought. He stole from me, and you let him." Was Sarah finally ready to turn against her father, or was this just another manipulation? Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at me with something I hadn't seen in months, genuine fear. "He's trying to get you declared mentally unfit," she whispered. "He told me not to warn you, but I couldn't just." She trailed off. "You already did let it get this far," I snapped. "You stood by while your father stole from me, harassed me, tried to take my house. I was scared," she said. "You don't know what he's like when he gets angry. He's been threatening me too." I wanted to feel sorry for her, but I was too angry, too tired. "Thank you for the warning. Now I need you to leave." The next day, I took Sarah's warning seriously. I filed a restraining order against Frank. I got notarized letters from my doctor and physical therapist confirming I was mentally stable and recovering normally. I had no history of mental illness and hadn't taken anything stronger than prescription painkillers, which I'd already stopped using. But Frank didn't stop. Someone egged my house. My tires got slashed. My physical therapist's office received a call claiming I was violent and unstable, a fake report, but I'd warned them ahead of time, so they knew it was bogus. Everything Frank did only made my case stronger. Then I found out something that really set me off. My buddy at City Hall called and said Frank had been asking about power of attorney forms, trying to see if he could take legal control of my assets due to my condition. He actually thought he could take my house. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to protect myself anymore. I was going to end this. Alan and I went nuclear. We filed everything: the storage unit photos, the car title, the surveillance footage, the forged documents, witness testimony from the county clerk Frank tried to bribe. We didn't keep it quiet either. Alan sent a legal notice to Frank's house, registered mail, his name in bold print big enough for any neighbor to see. 2 days later, the police showed up at Frank's house with a warrant. They found everything: drafts of forged documents, practice signatures of Sarah's name, fake bank withdrawal forms, even a fraudulent rental agreement for my house claiming Sarah had exclusive rights to it. Frank was arrested for fraud, attempted grand theft, forgery, and falsifying legal records. Sarah tried to play innocent, but they had her voice on one of my recorded phone calls with Frank, saying, "He doesn't even know what's coming." Would justice finally be served, or would Frank's connections help him escape consequences? The courtroom was packed. Frank sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, refusing to look at me. Sarah kept her head down, her lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. I showed up walking with a cane, still recovering but steady. The judge, Honorable Patricia Walsh, had reviewed everything beforehand. Frank's lawyer tried to argue it was family confusion, that they were just trying to protect me from myself during my recovery. Judge Walsh wasn't buying it. Mr. Morrison, she said, staring down at Frank, you are a former law enforcement officer who used your position and connections to systematically defraud and harass your son-in-law while he was at his most vulnerable. This represents a shocking abuse of family trust and authority. Frank was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. The judge added that he showed clear intent to manipulate and control through illegal means, and that his actions were particularly heinous given the victim's medical condition. Sarah took a plea deal, 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service, and a permanent restraining order. Judge Walsh gave her a warning I'll never forget. Mrs. Morrison, you were a grown woman who watched a man lie, steal, and systematically destroy another person's life, and you stood by and allowed it. That makes you dangerous in your own way. I got my Mustang back. Tommy at the auto shop helped restore the original paint job for free, said it was the least he could do. He even detailed it before I picked it up, but I sold it the next month. I didn't need it anymore, I needed closure. I used the money to put a down payment on a better house across town, closer to downtown Columbus. A place with no memories, no ghosts from the past. The divorce was finalized without much fight. Sarah's lawyer didn't contest much after the criminal convictions. I kept the house, the savings, and most importantly, my dignity. The story made it into the Columbus Dispatch. Former state trooper sentenced in vehicle theft and fraud case. Frank's picture was right there on the front page. The article mentioned the attempted property seizure and document forgery. His reputation was destroyed. Frank Morrison spent his career thinking his badge made him untouchable. Now he was just inmate number 471,906. As for me, I finished physical therapy, started working out again, and joined a support group for people who've been financially abused by family members. You'd be surprised how many of us are out there. I kept every document from the case, not because I need them anymore, but because I want to remember what happens when someone tries to break you and you refuse to stay down.